Vine said while she knelt on the ground in front of Jungkook. Sir, I'm really sorry. I made a mistake. Her eyes down and her heart regretting about what she did. Her legs shivered once, thinking as to how he will punish her now. Jungkook looked at her in utmost anger and growled to her. Mistakes are not tolerated here, Jungkook said loudly, sending shivers down her spine. Jungkook, I told you that on your first day. It hasn't even been a week that you're hired, and you're already making mistakes. In my mansion, mistake means death, and you're the only reason they will die today. Jungkook was about to pass by her when she immediately stood up in front of him, blocking his way. She directly looked into his eyes with no fear, no emotions. Vine, it was my mistake. I'd rather take responsibility. Jungkook looked at her with narrowed eyes, confused because no servant of his ever dared to look into his eyes directly. At least, not when they made a mistake. Jungkook looked back in her eyes. Trust me, you don't want to take responsibility. Jungkook stared at her soul as he said that. Fine. Trust me, I will do anything. Jungkook. Anything for them? Why don't you kill yourself then? Vine's hands shivered, but her eyes didn't move away from him. Vine, what proof do I have that you won't do anything after I kill myself? You didn't even blink? Jungkook scoffed as he slid his hands inside his pockets. I promise you then, if you kill yourself, I will only fire them and let them live. Vine, promise? You think I'm stupid? You can kill anyone without blinking. What makes you think I will believe your promise? He leaned down, getting closer to her face as he said, Then don't believe me, and watch them die. There was a long silence between them as they both stared at each other. Jungkook broke the eye contact, trying to move towards the two people standing behind Vine in extreme fear, as they were about to die. But Vine stopped him when she said, You have to keep your promise. Jungkook turned back, utterly shocked. He stared at her for a few seconds and then smiled, unable to believe her. Jungkook then ordered his bodyguard to give him the gun and stood in front of her, offering her the gun. Vine's hands shivered as she looked at the gun, but then she smiled. Vine smirked. How about we play Russian roulette? Russian roulette is a game where people take turns pointing a gun at their own head and pulling the trigger. The gun has only one bullet, and the unlucky one turns dead. Jungkook's eyes widened for a second. Vine, to be honest, it's not completely my fault. You couldn't teach me properly, so it's your mistake as well, isn't it? Jungkook scoffed. You're too cunning for a maid. How was it my fault that you didn't know how to do your work? Vine moved closer to him and raised her head to look at him in his eyes. Why? Are you too afraid of taking responsibility? Is that how a mafia king operates? I'm not afraid of anything, Jungkook said, looking back in her eyes. Not even death, he whispered, and emptied the gun in front of her, except the one bullet. Jungkook, look at them the last time, because you won't be able to after tonight. Vine's eyes flickered as she looked behind her. She smiled, looking at them because she doesn't regret it. Then she looked ahead at Jungkook, who offered Vine the gun. Ladies first. She looked in his eyes and smiled at her own death. She took the gun from his hand and pointed it at him. Jungkook's bodyguards immediately pointed all of their guns towards her. Jungkook, what the hell are you doing? Wine. It won't be fun if we kill ourselves. Let's point at each other. They looked at each other once again for a long minute, the tension between them intense. Vine didn't flinch with all the guns pointed at her, and Jungkook saw all of that. He smirked as he said, "You know how to make it fun. Shoot." Jungkook also didn't flinch and kept looking in her eyes without blinking. Vine's hands shivered. She swallowed and had second thoughts about it. What if she really ends up killing him? The thought made her whole body shiver. But it was still better than getting herself and 1,000 others to be killed. Vine's finger shivered before she gathered the courage and pulled the trigger on his forehead. But it was empty. The breath that was stuck in her throat for the last minute finally came out, and her heart thundered in her chest. Jungkook smiled and snatched the gun from her hand. Jungkook, my turn. He pointed the gun at her this time. Vine remembered her parents and closed her eyes, her whole body shivering. But Jungkook didn't feel any remorse and pulled the trigger in a second. Vine screamed once, but it was empty. She opened her eyes and took heavy breaths, only to look at him, smiling at her. Jungkook, at least you're afraid of something. It's so fun to see you like this. Vine took a few breaths before replying. What about you? You're really not afraid of even death? Jungkook scoffed. Do you even know who I am? While you clean houses at daytime and sleep at nighttime, I'm playing this game outside every now and then. It might be the first time for you, not me. Vine looked at him with pitiful eyes. Did he feel this fear every now and then? She can't even continue. Her hands and legs are frozen already when she looked at him offering the gun to her once again. She didn't want to play anymore. But she has to, no matter what. Save lives. She can't live with the regret that someone died because of her. Vine took the gun with her shivering hands and pulled the trigger on him once again. But it was empty, and it kept going on. Until the fifth time, when Vine pulled the trigger on Jungkook, but it was empty. Her heart came in her throat as it's the last time, and it's Jungkook who was going to shoot her. If the bullet wasn't in the last 5 chambers, it has to be in this. Jungkook scoffed. My turn, he said as he snatched the gun from her. Vine closed her eyes before Jungkook pulled the trigger on her. A tear fell from her eyes and he pulled it. But yet again, it was empty. Vine opened her eyes in shock as she took heavy breaths. Jungkook, did you think I would risk my life over a maid? Vine remembered that when Jungkook told her to look at the people behind her because she won't be able to see them next time, he must have emptied the whole gun at that time. Vine looked at him in extreme anger as she said in a loud voice, You enjoyed a lot today, didn't you? Jungkook chuckled. No doubt it was too much fun, he said as he leaned down to match her height and raised her chin from his thumb and index finger. Today's punishment was enough. I hope you won't make the same mistake again. They looked in each other's eyes. For Jungkook, this was the first time he encountered a woman like her. His heart pounded for her. He wanted to take her all in and not leave a trace out. Vine's heart pounded in her chest and she realized the dangers of standing against this man and working under him. They kept looking at each other and to be continued.